Peradaban di Universiti Malaya. Hari ini merupakan hari yang sangat bermakna kerana Pusat Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya menyambut 30 tahun sejak penubuhannya pada tahun 1995. Jadi saya amat berbesar hati untuk berada di sini dan mengucapkan terima kasih kepada para hadirin dan hadirat kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami dalam meraihkan hari yang berbahagia ini. Dan saya berharap juga tidak terlambat untuk saya mengucapkan Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri, maaf zahir dan batin. Izinkan saya berbicara dalam bahasa Inggeris. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Greetings to Professor Dr. Mujahid Rawa, Ahli Dewan Negara, Professor Dr. Khadijah Muhammad Hambali, the Director of the Universiti Malaya Centre for Civilizational Dialogue, UMCCD, Honourable Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Osman bin Bakar, Rector of International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM, the Honourable Professor Dr. Daniel Bell, Professor, Chair of Political Theory, Faculty of Law, University of Hong Kong, Dr. Mahmud Merican, the Advisor of the Universiti Malaya Centre for Civilizational Dialogue, UMCCD, distinguished panelists, guests and valued participants. Without further ado, I'd like to proceed with the first session of the day, which is the keynote speech and also the first session with Datuk Dr. Baharudin Ahmad, who is an associate member of the Pusat Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya or Universiti Malaya Centre for Civilizational Dialogue. He will moderate the event with our speakers being the Honourable Emeritus Professor Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar, Director of the International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM, with the keynote speech Islam and Confucianism, a Civilizational Dialogue, as well as Professor Dr. Daniel Bell, who will speak on philosophy, values, and ethics for sustainability. Tafaddal mashkura.
Can we start now?
Can proceed.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa bihi nasta'in. And a very warm welcome to every one of us. We don't have much time actually, and each speaker will be given 20 minutes to elaborate on the title of the talk. And I hope we'll be listening properly, and also there will be no question and answer session for the keynote addresses. Let me straight away introduce Professor Osman Bakar to you. He has a doctorate in Islamic philosophy of science and is currently director of the National Islamic University of Malaysia and the holder of Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology and Civilizational Studies and Renewal at ISTAC, the University's Graduate Institute, which means the Islamic University Graduate Institute. He is also Emeritus Professor of Philosophy of Science at the University of Malaya. He was also formerly Distinguished Professor and Director of Sultan Umar Ali Saifuddin Center for Islamic Studies, University of Islam in South Asia at Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. Dr. Osman is author and editor of 44 books and numerous articles in various aspects of Islamic thought and civilization. Some of his work has been translated into several languages, including Malay, Arabic, Mandarin, and Japanese, and Turkish. His latest work are Environmental Wisdom for Planet Earth, the Islamic Heritage, that was published in 2022, and Islam, Buddhism, Eco Dialogue in 2023. He has been named among the 500 most influential Muslims in the world since 2009. The title of his keynote address is Islam and Confucianism, a Civilizational Dialogue. Without further ado, I wish to call upon Prof. Osman to deliberate on this topic. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera. A very good afternoon. Brother Aris as the MC, Sri Mujahid, Tan Sri Zaina, and distinguished and guests, ladies and gentlemen, of course, a special appreciation to Professor Khadijah Hambali, the director of Pusat Dialog Peradaban, Universiti Malaya, Center for Civilizational Dialogue, University of Malaya, Professor Emeritus Dr. Azizan Harudin, the former director of the center, and of course a long time friend in this Islam and Confucianism dialogue. And also my friend from Brother Dean, Shamsuddin from Muhammadiyah in Indonesia. And I see faces that are familiar, old faces and new faces. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this keynote address on a very, very special occasion. There is the 30th anniversary of the Islam and Confucianism dialogue that was held in this very hall. I remember that very well. In this very hall, To be exact, on the 13, 14, and 15 March 1995. I remember that very well because I was the chairman of the organizing committee. That was 30 years ago when I was a young man, a young professor. But to be honest, I'm still young. Well, I feel younger. I feel young. So the proof is that I'm still excited talking about Islam and Confucianism dialogue. I would like to congratulate the Center of Malaya for organizing this commemorative event. And very, very historic, very, very significant because today, President of Republic of China, President Xi Jinping, will arrive, and our Prime Minister will be going later after this event here to welcome the President. And so it's very, very to me significant indeed. 30 years after that event, President of Republic of China coming to visit this country, and the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, was instrumental to the success of that 1995 conference. At that time, he was the Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia and Minister of Finance for the first time, and now the second time. For the first time, he was Minister of Finance. He delivered the official opening address with the Professor Tu Wei Ming at that time from Harvard University. He delivered the keynote address on this very platform I'm standing now. He delivered that address. So congratulations to the center, and I'm happy that the center has survived various challenges over the decades. I hope that some important messages will be coming from the Prime Minister about the center, and also, of course, I hope from the Vice Chancellor of the University of Malaya, and of course, you have Tan Sri Zainah here, who I think we hope to start a new chapter in the history of Islam and Confucianism dialogue. So, what was that past event that we are now commemorating? Well, it was called, it is a big, very big international conference, which we call Islam and Confucianism, the Islam and Confucianism, a civilizational dialogue. So it was a dialogue between civilizations. It was a very historic event, a very, very historic event. Nearly, you can imagine, more than 1,000 participants from all over the world, including from the Republic of China, from America, from Europe, who attended that. And in that conference for 2.5 days, scholars of Islam and scholars of Confucianism discussed, presented their papers to talk about in what way we can talk about commonalities. We emphasize on what were the things, what were the values or the ideas that bind the two together, the two civilizations, Islam and Confucianism. Since many of you, especially those who are under 30, I mean, you are not yet in this world, I want to, you don't know exactly why we had that. So I thought, why not I take a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, to tell you, to share with you what is it that prompted us? I say us, I'm referring to basically my own position as the Deputy Vice Chancellor at the time, as the Chairman of the Organizing Committee, and Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim as the Deputy Minister, who was the patron of that conference and who delivered the official address. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the intellectual background of that. Why I want to do this? Because that intellectual background that led to the event is not simply a matter of historical interest that was valid for that time. They just want to know. No, I'm saying that in any future dialogue between Islam and Confucianism, the intellectual background must always be there. In other words, the ideas that inspired that conference, I think those ideas are still valid, still relevant to us today and the future. I think that is very important. That's why I want that. So basically, what I call intellectual background means the ideas as well. Well, I will basically have to talk about my involvement. That started it all in 1992. When after Samuel Huntington published his paper in the summer issue of the Foreign Affairs, and that was the summer issue. It just happened that I was a visiting scholar, Fulbright visiting scholar at Harvard University at the Department of Science, and people in Harvard were debating about the clash of civilization thesis of Samuel Huntington. That started it all, and it was during that year that I came. Of course, I talked with my old PhD supervisor, Professor Hussein Nasser, who certainly inspired me, who certainly encouraged me to have a dialogue on Islam and Confucianism. He introduced me to Tu Weiming, Professor Tu Weiming, who was at Harvard. And incidentally, because of that introduction, I became acquainted with Professor Tu Weiming, and he invited me. He suggested my name to attend a conference in Slovenia. We were in a team drafting the World Social Summit held in Copenhagen in 1994, 1 year before the event. So when we were in Slovenia, in Copenhagen, we talked a lot about how we can prepare this big conference. This many things people do not know. And of course, personally, I read works on Confucianism. I was first introduced to Confucianism not in Malaysia, it's not in Malaysia, even though Malaysia, we have Confucianists living side by side, but I did not know about Confucianism until I did my PhD at Temple University in Philadelphia, where I was introduced to the course by Professor Professor Charles Fu, who taught this about Confucianism and Buddhism. And then when I was in Temple also doing my PhD, I was president of this Muslim Student Association at the university. So as president, I invited Professor Huston Smith, the author of the famous book, The Religions of Man, in which one long chapter is on Confucianism. I've never seen such a writing by a non-Confucian who is so sympathetic to Confucianism. It's as if it was written by a believer in Confucianism. And I was influenced by that. So basically, I would say that the immediate background was Samuel Huntington, because his clash of civilization, especially when his book, in book form, appeared. But the point is that this Samuel Huntington refer to the idea of the possibility that one day, the possibility that Islam and Confucianism, these two civilizations, will get together, have a kind of fight against Western civilization. But to be honest, I did not believe in that in theory, because we know we have been holding dialogue of civilization between Islam and the West for much earlier. All right. The fact that immediately after the event in 1995, Muslim leaders followed up on that by organizing big dialogue of civilization. I think that shows that and which later was adopted as the program called Alliance of Civilization, when the United Nations was under the Secretary General of Kofi Annan. You must know how important the role played by the leaders of Muslim countries that led to the event. That shows that dialogue of civilization, or the Islams, in trying to be closer to Confucianism, has nothing to do with political plans, which has nothing to do with some kind of global agenda to clash against the West. That's not true. But the point is, that was the background, the textual background that led to that 1995 event. Precisely, we were very really interested in having a better understanding. And of course, there is also the social political background, the Malaysian community, Malaysian society. We are a multi-religious country, we are a multi-ethnic country. The majority, the Chinese and the Malays and the Chinese have lived together. But we basically live together. We live in peaceful coexistence, but we do not really understand each other. We do not go deeper into our mind, into our soul. So that event in 1995 was very, very, very significant, because then we realized that beyond the surface of things, actually there are many, many elements, values, ideas that we share. And so I think and this is documented in the book Islam and Confucianism that I co-edited with in 1997. It has been translated already now into Mandarin, and of all languages, it is also translated into the Bosnian language. It's quite interesting. So that's basically what we are commemorating to remember the event. So both, of course, for the Prime Minister, for Dr. Sri Anwar, he has studied about Confucianism much earlier than me. He knew about Confucianism much earlier than me. Yeah? And I knew him to be someone who is very, very interested in dialogue when he was still a youth leader, a student leader. So that's been going on for a long time. So I was not surprised, and when, of course, he welcomed very much that event. And he has never stopped. He has been encouraging that. 30 years after, because 30 years after the event, what happened? Well, I mentioned just now about President Xi coming to this country, and then I have been told by Wisma Putra, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that China and Malaysia have agreed as one of the MOUs to be signed is the MOU on Islam and Civilizational Dialogue. And the University, of course, is selected for the MOU on other issues. Two MOUs between University of Malaya and China, I think in the field of engineering and AI. But as far as Islam and Confucian Dialogue, Malaysia has chosen the International Islamic University of Malaysia, of which I am now rector. And so, of course, it means that we have to build a new center in order to implement the MOU. That's 30 years after the event. I have never expected that that even 30 years ago would see developments like this. But given the little time that I had, let me talk about what happened in the intervening years. I just want to highlight some of the important events. Basically, first of all, I want to mention about the institutionalization of the Islam and Confucianism dialogue in the form of center. The Center for not just Islam and Confucianism, civil dialogue of civilization in general, but certainly the core was that civilization with Islam and Confucianism. So in 1996, as Deputy Vice Chancellor, I helped to develop the Center for Dialogue. At first, for 1 year or so, I was acting director of the center, apart from being Deputy Vice Chancellor, because we couldn't find yet a full-time director. In 1997, we got Dr. Chandra Mustafa, that well-known social activist and academic. So we appointed him to be the first director, full-time director of the center. And to show that we were serious, that it was not just a one-time event, we set up, or rather we established, or rather we introduced MA courses on these civilization studies, including dialogue of civilization. And that gained momentum. After the government, basically made compulsory a course for all public universities. It's called TITAS. It's called the Islamic Civilization and Asian Civilization. So that program introduced a new momentum. In that sense, we have to get people who can teach the subject. And University Malaya was chosen by the Ministry of Education, then headed by Datuk Sri Najib, the Minister of Education at the time. We became the center for that. Okay, so that one. What I want to mention here as a light of the year, since some students from Indonesia, during that conference in 1995, delegation of Confucians from Jakarta came to attend. And during that conference, they approached me saying that they need our help. They said, please help us. We belong to the group of Confucians in Jakarta, because in Indonesia at that time, Confucianism was not recognized as one of the state religions. Not the religion, it was recognized. So they told me that, they said, we want to conduct marriage rites according to the Confucius custom. But we couldn't do that. Yeah? So we have to follow the civil marriage. They cannot have marriage according to Confucius, right? But they have no choice but to go through this civil marriage. Now, so because of that, later on, through my acquaintance in Indonesia, including the former president, the late Abdurrahman Wahid, yeah, they all played a role. They all played a role in trying to make that happen. So eventually, Confucianism became recognized as one of the 6 religions, the state religion. I mean, I was very, very happy to see that. So to me, that was a consequence of that. Another level, I didn't realize that 1995 event inspired other Muslim leaders, especially Iran. The President Jafar Khatami was very much interested in that. So he initiated this dialogue. He took a very, very important role in the convening a conference of all Muslim foreign ministers, Muslim countries, on this dialogue, which later became further advanced by President Erdogan of Turkey right now, and the chairman, or rather the Prime Minister of Spain. These 2 countries played a very important role in pushing for the program agenda at United Nations, which is the Alliance of Civilizations. And why Spain? Why Spain? because of the position of Spain in history. So I remember in one of the books, in fact, now reprinted by the organizers here, my book published in 1997, in one of the chapters said, I refer to the role of Spain. Spain, post-Franco Spain. Once they realized their Islamic historical past, then they will play an important role as a bridge between Islam and the West, the rule of Spain. Because Spain, in a sense, used to be part of Islam as well as to be part of the West, of course. Yeah? So I think the idea of bridge. So that's an important thing. And of course, I was very, very happy to see developments in China itself. Developments in China, the interest, in other words, according to Professor Tu Weiming, that event in 1995 led to the creation of small circles of Muslim Chinese and their counterparts in China discussing about Confucius. There was a revival of interest in what is called Confucian Islam. Confucian Islam, or Islamic Confucianism. Okay. Let me conclude that. Yeah, so that's important as far as I'm concerned. Some of the last time does not allow me to speak of other things, but the point is, after in those years, after the event, there was always some programs going on. But I think now, with the new MOU between between China and Malaysia in the Islam and Confucian Dialogue, we're going to see a more vigorous, more active period of dialogue. All right. Let me suggest two points here. First of all, I think in talking about the future, what is the future then of Islam and Confucian dialogue? I see a brighter picture. I'm quite optimistic on that. But we need to build more bridges with Islam and Confucianism. Now, in 1995, when I presented my paper, during the discussion, question and answer session, I raised the point of the bridge. One of the bridges to be built is the role of Chinese Muslims. The role of Chinese Muslims as a bridge between Islam and Confucianism is very important for a simple reason. They are of ethnic Chinese, or some ethnic group, they are Chinese, they are Chinese, and of course they are also Muslim, they happen to be Muslim. The fact that they are Muslim, which means that they can connect themselves to Islam, and because they are Chinese, and they can attach themselves, they can connect themselves to the Confucian tradition. Then maybe in this country, Malaysia, they are a minority group, but apart from the number, I think they can play a very important role. And certainly in China itself, it's very important for the Chinese Muslims to play that role. What other bridges can be built? Can do that in education, in science and technology, on the environment, and so many other things. On even question of philosophy. To me, Islamic philosophy and Confucian philosophy have a lot of things to talk about on a wide range of issues. All right. So that's all I just want to say because time does not allow me to proceed. Well, once again, I'm very, very happy to be here in this very hall to talk about what happened 30 years ago and what happened in between then and now. Once again, thank you to the organizer. I look forward to a more energetic, active future when it comes to Islam and Confucian dialogue. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Osman. Now, Prof. Osman has explained to us the formation of this Center for Civilizational Dialogue from the very beginning. In fact, he was the one who established this center when he was the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Now, Confucianism and Islam will still remain relevant and still relevant and will continue to be relevant for many, many hundreds or thousands years to come. The understanding of it. So it's a country like Malaysia with major believers in Islam and also Chinese Confucianists. We hope the dialogue can be very fruitful here and can develop here. And the role of Chinese Muslim in developing civilizational dialogue between Confucianism and Islam. These are among the things that has been touched by Prof. Osman just now. And now I would like to call upon Professor Daniel Bell for the second keynote address. Professor Bell was born in 1964 in a Canadian political theorist, currently chair of political theory at the University of Hong Kong, Faculty of Law, previously Dean of School of Political Science and Public Administration at Shandong University and Professor of Tsinghua University at the College and Department of Philosophy. Prof. Bell has written many, many books. Among them is the Dean of Shandong, Confession of a Minor Bureaucrat of a Chinese University, and China Model, Political Bureaucracy and Limits of Democracy, and many other books, I think about 10 to 12 books. He was also the advisor for many universities in the United States, in Princeton too, for the translation project, and also is involved in many, many journals, academic journals throughout the world. With such a short introduction, I would like to call upon Professor Bell to deliver his second keynote address.
Apa kabar? 大家好. So I'm very honored to be here, and let me thank the Vice Chancellor, Professor Rector Osman Bakar, Professor Datuk Azizan Baharudin, and Professor Far Kimbong for the invitation as well, and distinguished members of the audience at the University of Malaya, the Center of Civilizational Dialogue, and the Center of Research on Southeast Asia Studies, as well as members of the Islam Dialogue Society in the audience of the University of Malaya. I don't know if we have a PPT. Oh yes, we have it in back. Okay. So, oh, perfect. Thank you. So, my talk, we live in times of global disorder, and I thought we needed to have the views of some philosophers who are idealists. They have moral ideals, but they are also political realists who think of how to engage with each other in times of chaos and disintegration, and especially how to forge ties of communal solidarity in these dark times. And I selected two thinkers from each tradition, one from the Confucian tradition, Xunzi, and one from the Islamic tradition, Ibn Khaldun, from the 14th century or so. They both have this similar problem. How, in these dark times of chaos, how can we establish ties of communal solidarity? So it's quite fascinating that we have both thinkers thinking about similar issues, and I think by putting them in dialogue with each other, they could learn from each other, and also it could help us think about how in these times of global disintegration, how we could establish more of this solidarity with each other. So let's go to the next slide, please. So very quickly, methodological considerations for civilizational dialogue. I mean, one is the kind of old-fashioned colonial, imperial approach, or the missionary approach, where you go there as a teacher to another culture and tradition, and you want to convert them to your own ways. And I think most of us would reject that approach today, so let's move on to the second slide, please. So then we have this mutual understanding approach, which I think is so important, that we want to understand each other, right? The Confucians want to understand the Islamic tradition want to understand the Confucian tradition, understand what are the commonalities and what are the differences. And this is important, especially for political reasons, because once we have better understanding, then it's easier to resolve our conflicts and to live together peacefully. But let's move on to the third approach. Next slide, please, which we can call, well, I wrote the creative approach, but maybe a better formulation is the mutual improvement approach, where each tradition engages with another tradition, not just for the purpose of understanding the other tradition, but for the purpose of mutual improvement, that I can understand what the problems are in my tradition by learning from the other tradition and vice versa. And I think that's what we've been doing here with these, with the Islam-Confucian dialogues for the past 30 years. And I hope to make a little tiny contribution by focusing on these two thinkers, as mentioned earlier, Xunzi and Ibn Khaldun. So Xunzi, he's quite fascinating, and my own area of expertise is political theory, and to my mind, he's the greatest political theorist in the Confucian tradition. I mean, his work is as important as Plato's Republic in the Western tradition of political theory, and he was writing in the darkest period of Chinese history. It was the worst times of the Warring States period. Constant violence, massacres, huge amounts of killings. And he was writing in these times of chaos. So naturally, he still was a Confucian. His ideas had Confucian moral foundation, but he was also a realist, saying how in these dark times can we promote these Confucian ideals? So let's look at the next slide. So his views of human nature, again, he was writing in very dark times, so it's not surprising that he would have a somewhat pessimistic view, where he argued that people are born with a tendency to badness, 性恶 in Chinese. And basically he argues that if people blindly follow their natural inclinations, this will lead to chaos and to aggressiveness and exploitation. And the powerful are sure to dominate and to exploit and kill those who have less power. So he says here, we can read his quote, humans are born with desires. When they have desires, but do not get the objects of their desires, they cannot but seek some means of satisfaction. And if there's no limit to their seeking, then they cannot help but struggle with each other. And then there'll be chaos, and then everybody will be impoverished. So let's move on to the next slide, please. The question is, how can we avoid that? Well, he says, actually, people can improve. So his student, Han Feizi, who systematized the legalist tradition, Fajia, he had the opposite view. He said people are born bad and they stay bad. But his teacher, in this sense, was more optimistic. He says we can improve by means of deliberate effort. First, by means of learning. If we have a commitment to learning from the sages of the past, it takes a lifetime process of learning, but we can improve from a moral point of view. So it's not just a matter of studying for intellectual purposes, but also for the purposes of moral improvement. We can make progress. So this is hugely important. But what's another way? Let's move on to the next slide, please. He says, well, we also need great teachers. Once we have great teachers, then they could serve as models and they could inspire us. So again, he would be very critical of, for example, replacing teachers with AI, because AI cannot serve as a great teacher. A great teacher has to inspire also by having suffering and vulnerability and showing how they could overcome suffering and vulnerability. That's one way in which people can improve, is by learning from great teachers, not by machines, but by great teachers who inspire through their model, through the way that they lead their lives. But that's the second way. But even most important is the third way. It's by means of rituals accompanied by music, 礼乐 in Chinese. So the slides are too small to read directly, so let me go to my notes here, if you'll give me a minute. So basically, he argues that the key to transformation, in other words, how can we move from this tendency to badness to become better people, to become good people? And he argues it's by participating in these rituals. So these ancient exemplary rulers, they hated chaos. So they established rituals and rightness in order to divide things between people, to civilize their desires, to satisfy their seeking, and they caused desires never to exhaust material goods, never to be depleted by desires, so that the two can support each other and prosper. This is how ritual arose. So we could learn to regulate our natural desires so there's a better fit between what we want and the goods available in society. And then, as a result, we will have social peace, material well-being and harmony, and communal solidarity. Rituals, they provide the bonds that do not rely solely on kinship or family, so that the whole larger society can partake of the benefits of cooperative social existence in larger societies. This is so important. So rituals that we every day, shaking hands and raising hands and attending funerals and mourning rituals and marriage rituals, these are all so important for having a better society. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So again, it's not just rituals, but they have to be accompanied by music as well. Now that sounds a little bit strange perhaps, but the point here is that rituals, they have to trigger an emotional response because our natural emotions are not necessarily positive, but by participating in rituals that make us feel oneness and a sense of community, we can change our emotions so that we become a better people and we can expand our love and care for people. But to trigger this emotional response, they have to be accompanied by music. So that's why in Chinese it's so important. We still use this term today, 礼乐. Any beautiful society, harmonious society with lots of communal solidarity has to be accompanied by rituals and music. That's why the great sage rulers of the past invented music to accompany the rituals. So they cause the progression, the complexity, intensity, and rhythm of music to be sufficient. They have to move the goodness in people's hearts. So when you hear music performed in ancestral temples, then everybody, yes, there's hierarchy, but the rulers and ministers, superiors and inferiors, everybody listens to it together, and then they all become harmoniously respectful. And this could lead people in a unified way. And this is the key to communal solidarity. And he was writing in the Warring States period, we need to have unified people with communal solidarity, very practical purposes. To have victory in war, we have to have a strong sense of solidarity. But also in times of peace, we need it, so that those with power come to care about those with less power, come to care about the needy. That's so important for Xunzi. Next slide, please. But we need to recognize that his thoughts have limitations because really, if the aim is to create a sense of communal solidarity, we do need commitment to learning, we need great teachers, and we need rituals accompanied by beautiful music. But in a really, in a society like Japan, which are very harmonious, communal, there's ethnic homogeneity, same language, times of peace. It's a society that's largely regulated by rituals and music. And yes, you do have communal solidarity. But what about societies like Malaysia or Canada, where I'm from, which are very multicultural with different languages and traditions and religions? Maybe rituals and music are not sufficient. And if you look at history, the way that it works, it seems that sometimes, frankly, to have an external threat or even an enemy is important for generating a sense of communal solidarity. I mentioned I'm from Canada. Canadians don't have a strong sense of communal solidarity or nationalism or patriotism until recently. Now they do. Why? Because Donald Trump threatens to invade Canada and turn us into the 51st state. So Canadians now have a sense. Okay, so let me quickly move on to the last thinker, Ibn Khaldun. So he was an Islamic scholar who's widely regarded as the forerunner of social science, hugely important. And his work had Islamic moral foundations, but he was also a political realist. He was writing in a times also of chaos. We can call it the warring tribes period. Next slide, please. He's most famous for this idea of asabiya, that how can we establish a strong sense of group feeling or social cohesion? The tribal loyalty that makes the individual devote himself to the tribe is the key to political power. And he said the stronger the attachment to the group, the more the tribe is capable of fighting and conquering others. Next slide, please. And he argues there's lessons for rulers. The rulers need to be acquainted with asabiya, this communal or social solidarity, and rely on nomads to increase their power. Next slide, please. He had a cyclical theory of history. He said that nomadic conquerors who have strong asabiya, they eventually succumb to the temptations of luxurious city life, and that's the beginning of the end, because the once brave nomads become soft and flabby and docile to outsiders, and the dynasty eventually falls to new tribes that have a stronger asabiya. Next slide, please. But his views are limited, of course, because maybe in a society like Afghanistan, actually, this theory really helps them understand the political developments. But in the modern world, we need to recognize that desert hardship and bravery in battle are not the only means to generate a strong sense of communal solidarity. So last two slides, I'm done in 1 minute, please. We need a creative approach to learning where we could have mutual understanding. So in peaceful and relatively modern societies composed of citizens living in settled communities, Schwinz's suggestions for generating a sense of communal solidarity and social harmony are appropriate. We do need these inclusive rituals accompanied by beautiful music to make the people feel as one. But his suggestions can be complemented by Khaldun's argument that asabiya needs to be contrasted with a decadent, overly individualistic and crassly materialistic society. Maybe let's call it US-style capitalism in order to cement these communal ties. So we do need an other out there to have a strong sense of solidarity. Last slide. So that's why perhaps Confucians and Muslims and Muslim Confucians, we can agree on the need to promote rituals and music to bind societies in emotional and harmonious ways, but we also need to emphasize struggle against a hyper-individualistic and materialist way of life promoted, well, I'm not going to say by who, but let's end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. That's the second keynote, philosophy, values, and ethics for sustainability. Now, I'd like to remind you a bit that Prof. Osman books are on sale. Probably you can get it from the publisher. They are outside the hall with a very good price, special discount for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have much time left. I think I need to end this session by saying thank you to all of you for listening to our Keynote 1 and Keynote 2. Normally, politicians, they call for unity, they call for understanding, but it's the academic who has to fulfill the content and the substance for what is unity and what is, being together in a country, a nation, or among the individuals, thinkers. So thank you very much for your patience, and I hand over this event to the organizer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to acknowledge and warmly welcome Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Zarinah Anwar, Chairman of the University Malaya's Board of Directors, to today's event. Thank you to the keynote speakers from the previous session. Dato', thank you very much for moderating this session. I'm reminded of the book by Jeremy Bentham in his magnum opus, An Introduction to the Principles of Legislation and Morals. So the great utilitarian thinker Jeremy Bentham, he mentioned that nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. So as human beings, we move towards pleasure and we try our best to avoid pain, whatever that may be. So utility is very important here because we as human beings, we understand that we have aspirations, ambitions, dreams, and hopes. And with any civilization, these aspirations could be similar. And this is why intercivilizational or civilizational dialogue is of utmost importance before, in the present, and also in the future. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to now invite for the Forum on the Intercivilizational Dialogue and Imperative for ASEAN, the panelists, Honorable Professor Dr. Sivamurugan Analaki Pandian, the Professor, School of Social Sciences, University of Science Malaysia, USM, Professor Dr. Din Shamsuddin, Chairman, Center for Dialogue and Cooperation Among Civilizations, CDCC, Associate Professor Dr. Leong Chang Hong, Senior Fellow and Head, Social Cohesion Research Program, S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technology University, Singapore, Professor Dr. Far Kim Bang, Professor of ASEAN Studies, International Islamic University of Malaysia, IIUM, and our moderator, Dr. Alwani Binti Ghazali, a core member of Center for Civilizational Dialogue, UMCCD, and Senior Lecturer, Department of Aqidah and Islamic Thought, Academy of Islamic Sciences, University of Malaya. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So we are now at the second session, which is Forum, entitled Civilizational Dialogue and Imperative for Asia. Let me first of all introduce our panelists who have long CVs and esteemed. To cut it short, I will only highlight 3 points for each panelist. The first one is Professor Dr. Muhammad Sirajuddin Shamsuddin, or M. Din Shamsuddin. He's from Indonesia, a former chairman of Muhammadiyah and Majlis Ulama Indonesia. He's also a former special envoy of the Indonesia's President for Interfaith and Intercivilizational Dialogue and Cooperation, and President Moderator of Asian Conference of Religions for Peace, or ACRP 2010 to 2020. Presently a chairman of Center for Dialogue and Cooperation Among Civilizations, CDCC, and chairman of Global Fulcrum of Wasatiyat Islam. The second panelist is Professor Dr. Far Kim Bang. He's a professor of ASEAN Studies at the International Islamic University Malaysia, a senior research fellow at the Asia-Europe Institute in University of Malaya, and the author of ASEAN Peace Axioms Redefined and Confucianism in Islam, the Symmetry Assessed. Our third panelist is Associate Professor Dr. Leong Chan Hong, from Singapore, head of the Social Cohesion Research Program at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He is also a fellow and elected board member of the International Academy for Intercultural Research and a council member of the National Integration Council in the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, Government of the Republic of Singapore. And last but not least, our fourth speaker, Professor Dato' Sivamurugan Pandian from USM. He's a professor at School of Social Sciences, University of Science Malaysia, USM, also a USM Senate member. He was the principal consultant or researcher who formulated policies named as KAMI, or Keluarga Malaysia Unity Plan 2021 to 2025, and Malaysian Indian Action Plan PTMI 2022 to 2027, both research under Ministry of Unity Malaysia. In 2016 and 2017, he was chosen as Patriotic Icon by the Ministry of Communication and Multimedia Malaysia. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to the stage. I hope I have saved some time there. Now we move to the first round with our first panelists. A simple question, a basic question, but important to be understood and digested. Professor Shamsuddin, what is actually civilizational dialogue, and can you please elaborate based on Islamic perspective? Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Due to time's constraint, I'll be rather straightforward, but allow me to convey the message, heart feeling and sympathy and condolence of many Muslim leaders in Indonesia from various Islamic organizations for the demise of Allahu Yarham Tun Abdullah Ahmad Badawi, with prayer, may God bestow him with mercy and paradise. Don't consider 5 minutes. I don't begin. Dialogue from the Islamic theological perspective is indeed a must, and there had been kind of perennial dialogue when God the Almighty, the Creator, is going to create the first man, Adam. This creation of human being involving dialogue between the Creator and the two existing creatures, the angels and the jinns. And also throughout history, when Islam came and Prophet Muhammad migrated to Yathrib, he began with dialogue, not only between religious communities, the Jews and the Christians, but also between the ethnic groups existing in Medina at that time. And this dialogue resulted in the consensus for the so-called Medinan Charter, which is indeed the first human rights chapter in human history, emphasizing that we need to live together based on human fraternity and the principles of common good and common well-being. So really there is a theological root in Islam for dialogue. And then the dialogue today is a must, because we have been facing the very threatening challenges to human civilization. Many experts I read, labeled our situation is the world of uncertainty. This is from the World Chinese Economic Forum. And others use the term the world of disorder, great shift, big disruptions. And I love to quote the result from the Interaction Council, which is a group of former head of state and government who use the term that we are facing a cumulative global damages. So that there is dialogue, as mentioned by Professor Osman Bakar, that the United Nations has launched intercivilizational dialogue by the creation of the so-called Alliance of Civilization. But, the flurry of dialogue, both at the international level, at local level, national and local levels, as well as a dialogue between religious communities, interfaith dialogues, and dialogue of civilization. Indeed, this kind of dialogue has not yet succeeded, because in my observation, these dialogues are indeed more monologues, 2 or 3 monologues. We need a paradigm shift, the shift of paradigm of dialogue, which has been suggested by many, dialogical dialogue, which is dialogue based on sincerity, openness, frankness for problem solving. In the ASEAN context, I see, despite the fact that ASEAN is the most solid regional association of states, but there is a problem among us because of multiculturalisms and also multi-faith in this region, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and also Confucianism. So we need dialogue. But dialogue, once again, should be dialogical dialogue based on sincerity, openness, frankness, that there are problems between us, but for problem solving. It's easy to say, but it's difficult to implement. But we still we need to maintain our hope for future dialogue in our region, and therefore specifically I would like to suggest Indonesia and Malaysia, Malaysia in Indonesia, 2 Muslim countries and neighboring countries should maintain and develop dialogue. And that's why in the next future, hopefully we are going to launch a new dialogue between Muslim intelligentsia in the 2 countries under the title of Majelis Cendekiawan Madani of Malindo, Malaysia and Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in other words, dialogue is not a simple process of communication, but it is something in depth, which requires honesty, which requires transparency, and also trust to a certain extent. Now we move to the next question, Prof. Far. So since you have been dealing with ASEAN studies and pertinent issues such as diplomacy, security, institutional development, regionalism, for a start, could you please describe how ASEAN evolved in the aspects of economy, security, and what is the current state in strengths and opportunities?
Can everyone hear me? Am I allowed to stand up?
Sure, as you please.
Thank you. Because certain furnitures are blocking the sight. Yeah. With regards to ASEAN, certain words that we assume to have a very stable meaning, such as social-cultural dialogue, is not as simple as it is when it is operationalized within the ASEAN Secretariat or the ASEAN community. The reason is very simple. Within the Charter of ASEAN, which is the constitution that binds all the 10 member states together, and ideally the dialogue partners that form the 11 partners in ASEAN, whenever we use the word culture or dialogue, it's actually a prelude to understanding the other side, who may be facing man-made or natural human disasters at some point in their evolution or future. So when ASEAN is having social-cultural dialogue, and one of the pillars of cooperation is social-cultural cooperation, followed by political and security and economic cooperation. What ASEAN really wants to do among all the member states is to establish a minimal threshold of understanding of how to understand each other's culture before they send their team into those countries that are affected by natural disasters, such as the most recent earthquakes in Myanmar, in spite of the fact that there are political differences, very acute political differences between Myanmar and the rest of the member states. So ASEAN should be understood within that context whenever we invoke the word cultural or social dialogue. Has that answered your question?
a little bit more explanation needed for the aspects of ASEAN economy and security at the moment, and also the strengths, opportunities in the future.
As a professor of ASEAN studies, I'm not supposed to be saying anything that is adverse or negative against my own field. But that having been said, political science or international relations does not forbid self-introspection or self-criticism. And that's also part of Confucianism and in fact one of the ethical requirements of Islam, to be able to look within. So on that context, allow me to use a very simple formula. ASEAN can be understood from the context of the good, the bad, and the ugly. With the one exception, there's no Clint Eastwood there. Everyone has to agree by consensus or even keep quiet when they see something that is ugly and that is bad. However, precisely because our salary in ASEAN is tax-free and is also based on American dollar, thank you very much, Donald Trump. Those who are working in ASEAN with very high salary, they normally zip their lips when they are actually addressing issues that are very controversial in nature. But whatever that I can say about ASEAN, to a large extent also reflects very aptly about what my very dear colleague, Professor Daniel Bell, said earlier about Sun Tzu, that human nature is born with certain defects and flaws, but there are methodologies and there are ways in which the human nature can be reformed. For those who actually embrace or come from the faith of Islam, from the age of 10, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe Senator Mujahid Rawa, whose father comes from a very distinguished religious family, may be able to answer that more accurately. From the age of 10, for male children, the parents are actually given the authority to just discipline them very lightly. Am I correct? When it comes to performing the Fardul Ain, light discipline, it doesn't mean corporal punishment. Pray, fast. Am I right? So he acknowledged with. So in that sense, Islam and Confucianism have that kind of commonality. And right now, my eyes are darting around and looking for the rector of my university, Professor Osman Bakar. Is he in the room? In the conference room right now? What I want to say basically is that I was not someone who can ascend to the position of a professor of ASEAN studies. But he had that faith in me and made me a professor of ASEAN studies based on my decades of experience of practicing in the field of ASEAN and finally becoming the director of the Secretariat. So what I say actually combines both practical and academic experience.
Thank you very much.
I hope I have explained your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Fa. Now we move to the third question. Before that, I would like to welcome, selamat datang, ketibaan. Selamat datang kepada Yang Berhormat Timbalan Menteri Agama, Dr. Zulkifli Hasan. So the third question goes to Associate Professor Dr. Leong. Simple question. What is your critical appraisal of the current dialogue of civilizations among ASEAN members?
Well, thank you, University Malaya and the Center for Civilization Dialogue for inviting me here to share with you my perspective. I'm from Singapore. Before I get into the question, maybe I'll just do a very quick intro and explain why or how we can see that connection to the state of cohesion in ASEAN. I am the head of Social Cohesion Research Program in the S. Rajaranam School of International Studies. Social cohesion is typically not a profession or discipline that you think will fall under international relations. And the reason why it is part of the school is because the concept of security has evolved over the years. And we look at security not just as something that to do with diplomacy or the military, but very much with the social fabric. And to do that, we need to understand the fluidity of groups. Because I think going back to today's conversation about inter-civilization dialogue, the very nature of inter suggests that you already have two distinct groups. But that's not always the case, and certainly it doesn't necessarily mean that clash is inevitable. And if you look at Southeast Asia as a region, it's very diverse, has always been diverse. And the fact is that we have coexisted for many, many years. And to a large extent, there is that shared common understanding of rituals, as what Daniel pointed out, of some kind of norms and values that we all embrace. But this is not to say that clash is something that will never happen. Because much as we pay attention to inter-civilization dialogue, there's actually something else that maybe we can also consider, and that is intra-civilization. I say this because I think when we look at the segments, the groups, right, who belongs, who is part of us, who is not part of us, very often you realize that you have a lot in common between people from different faith groups, different ethnicity, for instance. But there's also quite a lot of differences, right, between people within similar sectarian identities. And this may be the group that feels that a clash is inevitable. Right? So when we look at the state of cohesion in different nation states, I think it's important to look at who are the groups that we're looking at. And very often it may well be the subgroups or the segments within the different communities that probably will benefit more, right, from a deeper conversation, from the dialogues that we have intend to foster. And to do that, I think I'd like to go back to what Prof. Osman said, which is to leverage, for instance, the case of Chinese Muslims. I think this is where there is the intersection across faith, across ethnicity and civilizations, and these are the ones that are the intra, who can play a big part in promoting the intra civilization, right, to start off, because that can help to promote the conversation further and take the conversation to the next level. And when you talk about the status of that, the dialogue, the inter-dialogue, I think those are the interlocutors that can play a part, right, to foster a greater cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in other words, when we talk about ASEAN, we imagine the diversity of the ASEAN community itself, and then it's actually about perspectives, and it's actually about identity, how we perceive ourselves and how we appreciate similarities and differences and manage them as well. Okay, we now go to the fourth question to Professor Dato Siva Murugan. In a Malaysian context, how do you view the Malaysia's strengths and potentials as interlocutor of dialogue of civilizations as an ASEAN member?
Thank you, Dr. Alwani, as the moderator, panels, distinguished guests, friends and students. A very good afternoon, everyone. First, allow me to express my gratitude to the organizer who extended an invitation to be part of this forum today. It's a great pleasure to be back to Universiti Malaya as alma mater. Many doesn't know, I think. Many thought I'm from University Science Malaysia. Yes, my employer is USM, but the sense of belonging still is UM. In this great hall, I was conferred my first degree and as well my PhD. 2 degrees here. And for the students here, I strongly believe that you'll feel the sense of belonging once you're out from the campus. You can take out Universiti Malaya from you, but you cannot take out UM from yourself. I think sometimes history speaks. Let's go back to the question. Okay, the strength of Malaysia. I strongly believe that Malaysia would be able to play that role to promote, I would say, the bridge towards culture and also mutual understanding that are more important than ever. We have seen that on this campus, we have seen that in Malaysia, and of course, Malaysia is uniquely positioned itself with its multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-cultural identity. It stands at the crossroad of East and West civilization and has centuries of experience managing diversity. As what Prof. Osman said earlier, we are an example of coexistence. Malays, Chinese, the Indians, indigenous people, the Sabahans, Sarawakians coexist with different faith, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, and also whatever rituals that we practice. And we cannot deny that challenges do exist, but yet Malaysia presents a functioning model of cultural and religious pluralism. Malaysia is known for its moderate Islamic voice, long trying to promote moderation in Islam. Again, there are certain voices against that wall, but I think there are many initiatives taken, including the Civilizational Dialogue Center, to promote and position the bridge between Islam and non-Islamic civilization. Of course, we are looking at the history, how Malaysia was a key player in the trade routes. It absorbed influences from India, China, Middle East, and Europe. And that makes Malaysia naturally adapt a civilizational intersection. And of course, we are looking at Malaysia as a founding member of ASEAN and often promotes peace, neutrality, and cooperation. And I think, as what Kim Bang said earlier, although we practice non-aligned foreign policy, non-interference, but we have the credibility in both the global north and south. Malaysia would be able to play a balancing role in regional and global conversation. And I think there are challenges to address. Of course, domestic challenges, which include ethnic tensions, political instability, and identity politics. This can weaken Malaysia's external image if it was not addressed, but consistency between domestic and international values is key to maintaining credibility and what role Malaysia can play. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Siva. So, the same question, almost the same question. Yes, Prof. Fa, anything?
Can you hear me? Can I just follow up on what my colleague, Professor Siva, just explained?
Yes.
And also what Pat Dean, whom I've known many decades ago, but I was too shy to approach you then. But this platform allows me to stand up and speak. Can I, once again?
Sure.
I don't mean to stand out and try to be different from everyone. It's just that this furniture shouldn't be here. So, but it's there. allow me to explain that whatever we do here has a connectivity to what will happen in ASEAN Summit next month. The most likely date is 31st of May. As we speak about Islam and Confucianism dialogue, it's extremely important to understand that for the first time in the history of ASEAN, ASEAN will actually meet with another regional organization known as the Gulf Cooperation Council, plus one, which is China. And all of us can agree whether it is 3 months from now or maybe 1 week away, we are now all at the abyss of an economic future that is extremely uncertain and made possible because of one man. And that one man is, of course, Trump. Next month, ASEAN and Gulf Cooperation Council, that has been collaborating from 2009 onwards at the ministerial level, has upgraded the relationship to one where all the heads of states will be converging in Kuala Lumpur, and their session will be chaired by Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, and Prime Minister Lee Chiang will also be here. So a new formula has actually been created. What is unique about that formula is that to some degree, even though the Organization of Islamic Country is formed of 57 states that are predominantly Muslim in their religious demography, 57 out of 182, the 182 is actually Palestine. To the degree that we can say that Gulf Cooperation Council represent a section of the Islamic world, then by next month, we have an Islam-Confucian dialogue in the real terms. Because in ASEAN, there are 3 predominantly Muslim countries, which is Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei. Within ASEAN, there are also countries that are Confucian in nature, which is Singapore. But I'm not exactly sure what direction Singapore will be taking next month, because I just received news that Singapore will dissolve its parliament. No, they just dissolved the parliament today, and they'll have an election soon. If we can use ASEAN as an embodiment of Confucianism, and if we can use GCC as the personification of Islam, then Confucian Islam followed by China, potentially Japan, South Korea, will actually create what Huntington predicted, but in a very alarmist terms in 1993. Huntington actually said 2 things in his article on the clash of civilization. One, the civilizations in the world are divided into 7. Islamic and Confucian civilizations are 2 of them. 2, there will come a point where the Islamic and the Confucian world will begin to ask the West, you are in the minority. Why are you continuing to exert such huge dominance and hegemony on the rest of the world? What is known as the Anglo-Saxon Protestant country. And the third one, Samuel Huntington predicted that the Confucian Islamic civilization will not just critique the West, but actually form a Confucian Islamic alliance. Whatever that is happening next month on May 31st, we don't have any intention of forming an alliance against the United States or against anyone. We will just provide the platform, as ASEAN always does, for various countries, various powers to meet in a neutral venue to resolve their differences. So the 11 dialogue partners of ASEAN are Australia, Canada, India, China, Japan, South Korea. The United Kingdom managed to find its way in after Brexit. United States, Russia, New Zealand, European Union. All of these dialogue partners can actually initiate any kind of mechanism to have region-to-region solidarity, short of becoming a unified bloc to challenge whoever that they do not want to openly challenge. So that is the one feature that I would like to add to what Professor Siva Murugan
Thank you very
has
much,
already said
Prof.
and Pak Din.
Yeah, I think that's a very insightful conclusion for our session today, since the next session is starting very soon. Can I have 30 seconds of conclusion from each panelist, please? We start from Prof. Siva.
That's fast. I have to conclude. I think ASEAN is a home of a rich mosaic of civilizations, from ancient Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. Of course, in this diversity lies not division, but immense potential for mutual learning, harmony, and collaboration. We can have a region that embraces dialogue, not just tolerance, and I hope ASEAN evolves from mere coexistence to genuine dialogue. Dialogue is necessary, it's timely, but more Malaysia is taking over the position as ASEAN chairmanship. Maybe we can have something to be established on so-called dialogue center of ASEAN to reflect on the differences and how to celebrate the diversity so that we can become a role model for the others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 30 seconds, Prof. Din.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize on the second phrase of our topics, an imperative for ASEAN. Let's begin with a realistic view that ASEAN is not, monolithic, based on religion, race, and ethnicity, and also political ideology and orientation. And also it's not homogeneous in terms of values and cultures. So that there are always loopholes, of tension and even conflict between us, between nations, between religious communities. And therefore, my proposal, ASEAN need leaders in each country with statesmanship orientation, that he or she is beyond, all groups, existing religious group, ethnic groups, and many others. And the second thing that we need now, shared theology, it's only a term, shared theology from our respective religions that tends to dialogue. Thanks God that you have in Malaysia the Islam Hadari of the late Tun Badawi and Islam Madani of the current Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. And we have in Indonesia, for example, Islam Berkemajuan from Muhammadiyah, Progressive Islam, and also in many others. Let's begin with our respective religions, and also we encourage other religious communities to develop shared theologies. The theology of dialogue, theology of tolerance, cooperation, and collaboration. And thirdly, we need to cope with any, appearing problems. We have to be realistic and to be honest. There are still problems between who claim to be, indigenous people with the diaspora, In Indonesia, there is always sentiment of anti-China, for example. And that's why from our organization like Indonesian Ulama Council with the Supreme Council of Confucianists in Indonesia, we have conducting more than 3 times Islam Konghucu Dialog, ICD, Islam Confucianist Dialogue. And hopefully the 4th theory of this dialogue will happen next month or the next 2 months in order to cope our problem. And political as well economic orientation of many ASEAN countries have paved the way for tension. There are more wealthy countries and there are less countries, and there is always create loopholes for tension and dialogue. And so that this conversation, like today in UM, should be succeeded with many conversations, because we believe in the power of dialogue, and we are optimistic of ASEAN is peaceful, stable, just, and prosperous regions of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Dr. Leong.
Thank you. 3 points. Number 1, diversity is here to stay. And probably we get even more diverse as we are becoming integrated with the rest of the world in different forms, economically, socially. Second point, I think we definitely need to look at what are the common goals, what are some of the common shared values that we all embrace, regardless of your civilization that it comes from. I think this is a common theme from all the speakers today, as well as from the keynote. A third point is the importance of dialogue, be that inter-civilization dialogue or intra-civilization dialogue. I think those are very important, right, to ensure that there is the engagement, ongoing engagement, and importantly, it's also about a pragmatic way of engaging and understanding where are the constraints, the limitations, and how we can find a comfort zone that we can all coexist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, we end the session for this forum. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Please be seated.
Thank you very much to our moderator and the panelists for a very engaging session. There's a Malay saying, masa mencemburui kita, or time is envious of us. So, unfortunately, we have to part ways rather hastily. But inshallah, we'll move on to the next session, which is the arrival of our Prime Minister. But prior to that, we will take a 5-minute break. But please do remain within the hall. Thank you very much for your time, and Jazakallah khair.
Sir, test. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2.
Salam sejahtera. Mohon hadirin untuk mengambil tempat duduk masing-masing kerana majlis akan bermula sebentar lagi. Terima kasih. Perhatian dimohon kepada hadirin untuk mengambil tempat duduk masing-masing kerana majlis akan dimulakan sebentar lagi. Terima kasih. Kemudianlah. Diulang sekali lagi, mohon kerjasama para hadirin untuk mengambil tempat duduk masing-masing. Majlis akan bermula sebentar lagi. Terima kasih. Selamat datang kami ucapkan kepada semua hadirin yang dihormati ke majlis penutupan Persidangan Antarabangsa Dialog Peradaban ICONCIDI 25. Untuk makluman semua hadirin, persidangan antarabangsa ini dianjurkan bersempena dengan sambutan 30 tahun Dialog Peradaban di Universiti Malaya. Sebelum itu, izinkan saya memperkenalkan diri Azura Azilah binti Ayub daripada Pusat Pembelajaran Integral akan mempengacarakan majlis petang ini. Para hadirin yang dihormati, izinkan saya menyampaikan beberapa panduan sebelum majlis ini bermula. Apabila diumumkan ketibaan Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri masuk ke Dewan, para hadirin dipersilakan berdiri. Sebaik sahaja Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri selesai mengambil tempat beliau, lagu Negaraku dan lagu Universiti Malaya akan dimainkan. Para hadirin diminta kekal berdiri dan duduk setelah dipersilakan oleh juru acara. Kerjasama para hadirin dipohon supaya memastikan telefon bimbit ditukarkan kepada nada senyap agar perjalanan majlis tidak terganggu. Hadirin turut dipohon untuk terus kekal berada di dalam Dewan sehingga majlis tamat. Sekiranya berlaku sebarang kecemasan, para hadirin diminta agar tidak cemas, bertenang dan mengikut arahan yang akan diberikan oleh pegawai yang bertugas. Kerjasama dari para hadirin yang kami hormati amatlah dihargai dan semoga majlis ini dapat berjalan dengan lancar. Terima kasih. mengumumkan ketibaan yang amat berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri, masuk ke dalam Dewan.
Malaysia Madani, sepenuh hati, jiwa, semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia Madani. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, sembarakan Malaysia Madani, sepenuh hati, jiwa, semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia Madani. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, bangunkan Malaysia Madani, sepenuh hati, jiwa, semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia Madani. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, sembarakan Malaysia Madani, sepenuh hati, jiwa, semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia Madani. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, bangunkan Malaysia Madani.
Dipohon semua juru foto untuk meninggalkan pentas utama bagi memberi laluan lagu Negaraku dan lagu Universiti Malaya.
Universiti Malaya, kebanggaan kita semua, bertambah para ilmuwan di berbagai lapangan. Kami bertekad hati mencapai cita murni, tradisi kecemerlangan menepati wawasan. Di sini kami sedia berbakti, terus berinovasi. Kami harapkan generasi muda, terus nusa dan bangsa. Varsity kesayanganku, sungguh banyak jasamu membentuk insan mulia, berilmu berbudaya. Di sini kami sedia berbakti, terus berinovasi. Kami harapkan generasi muda, terus nusa dan bangsa. Varsity kesayanganku, sungguh banyak jasamu membentuk insan mulia, berilmu berbudaya.
Para hadirin dipersilakan duduk. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera dan salam Malaysia Madani. Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri. Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Diraja Dr. Zamri bin Abdul Kadir, Menteri Pendidikan Tinggi. Yang Berhormat Ahli Jemaah Menteri dan Timbalan-Timbalan Menteri. Tuan Yang Terutama, Duta-Duta dan Perwakilan Asing. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Zarina Anwar, Pengerusi Lembaga Pengarah Universiti Malaya. Yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Seri Insinyur Dr. Nur Azwan bin Abu Osman, Naib Chancellor Universiti Malaya. Yang berusaha Profesor Dr. Khadijah binti Muhammad Khambali, Pengarah Pusat Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya. Para panel dan peserta Persidangan Antarabangsa, pegawai-pegawai kanan Kerajaan Persekutuan dan ahli lembaga pengurusan universiti serta tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian. Agar majlis pada petang ini diberkati dan hadirin dirahmati, majlis mempersilakan Al-Fadhil Dr. Muhammad Syahid bin Muhammad Noh, Ketua Jabatan Syariah dan Ekonomi, Akademi Pengajian Islam bagi memimpin bacaan doa. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, berkatilah kami semua dalam majlis sambutan 30 tahun Dialog Peradaban di Universiti Malaya. Sungguhnya Engkaulah Tuhan yang telah pun mengurniakan taufik dan kejayaan bagi pusat ini. Dan rahmat-Mu jualah ia terus berkembang sebagai wadah ilmu, menjadi persafahaman dan keharmonian antara agama dan budaya. Ya Allah, Ya Karim, kami mohon kepada-Mu, Ya Allah, agar terus memberkati usaha yang murni ini. Perkukuhkanlah nilai keinsanan sejagat, perteguhkanlah semangat dialog dan toleransi, serta perkasakanlah pemahaman agama dan juga dalam pelbagai bangsa dan budaya. Ya Allah, Ya Rauf, bantulah kami semua dalam menyumbang dalam pembinaan akal dan budi untuk mencetuskan pemikiran yang harmoni demi kebaikan Malaysia tercinta. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين تقبل الله منا ومنكم.
Amin, amin, ya Rabbal Alamin. Terima kasih diucapkan. Bagi membuka tirai majlis kita pada hari ini, majlis dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan Yang Berusaha Profesor Dr. Khadijah binti Muhammad Khambali, Pengarah Pusat Dialog Peradaban untuk menyampaikan ucapan alu-aluan. Dengan segala hormatnya dipersilakan.
Terima kasih kepada pengacara majlis Puan Azura. Alhamdulillahirrabbilalamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri. Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Diraja Dr. Zamri bin Abdul Kadir, Menteri Pendidikan Tinggi. Yang Berhormat Ahli Jemaah Menteri dan Timbalan-Timbalan Menteri. Tuan Yang Utama, Duta-Duta dan Perwakilan Asing. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Zarina Anwar, Pengerusi Lembaga Pengurusan Universiti Malaya. Yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Seri Dr. Nur Azwan bin Osman, Naib Chancellor Universiti Malaya. Yang berbahagia Barisan Pro-Chancellor Lembaga Pengarah dan Pengurusan Universiti. Para penyampai ucap utama dan para panel pembentang persidangan antarabangsa, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan Barisan Pengurusan Tertinggi Universiti Malaya, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan para peserta persidangan antarabangsa yang saya kasihi serta dirahmati Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala yang mengikuti siaran langsung maupun secara maya persidangan ini. Pohon sirih, pohon selasih, tumbuh merimbun di hujung laman. Kalungan budi junjungan kasih atas kehadiran puan-puan yang budiman. Alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah. Setinggi-tinggi kesyukuran kita panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala kerana dengan limpah kurnia dan izinnya jua kita dapat berhimpun pada petang yang penuh makna ini bagi meraihkan detik bersejarah perjalanan gemilang 30 tahun Pusat Dialog Peradaban. Menerusi penganjuran persidangan yang bertemakan 30 tahun Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya. Terlebih dahulu saya merakamkan setinggi-tinggi penghargaan dan ucapan jutaan terima kasih kepada Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri, atas kesediaan hadir bersama-sama dengan kami menyampaikan ucap tama pada petang yang bersejarah ini. Kehadiran Yang Amat Berhormat bukan sahaja melambangkan sokongan penuh kerajaan terhadap inisiatif yang digerakkan oleh Universiti Malaya, malah turut memperteguh komitmen kolektif dalam memperkasakan agenda dialog peradaban ke arah membina sebuah masyarakat madani yang lebih inklusif, berdaya saing dan harmoni. Saya juga ingin mengambil kesempatan merangkakan ucapan tahniah yang tulus kepada seluruh warga Pusat Dialog Peradaban atas dedikasi dan komitmen yang tidak pernah luntur dalam mempertabatkan budaya ilmu serta memperkukuh nilai saling memahami dan menghormati kepelbagaian peradaban masyarakat multi-etnik di Malaysia dan dunia sejagat. Hadirin dan hadirat yang dihormati, dengan pendekatan yang inklusif dan berteraskan nilai-nilai sejagat, Pusat Dialog Peradaban bukan sahaja mengangkat suara Malaysia dalam wacana dialog antara agama di peringkat antarabangsa, bahkan menjadi rakan aktif dalam menyumbang kepada penyelesaian isu-isu kemanusiaan dan perdamaian global melalui kerjasama dengan nama besar seperti The International Dialogue Centre (KICID), The Organisation of Islamic Cooperation (OIC), UNESCO serta pelbagai jaringan antara agama dan antara budaya sedunia. Kejayaan kita raikan hari ini adalah hasil usaha dan iltizam para pengarah yang terdahulu menerajui pusat ini sejak awal penubuhannya bersama-sama core members yang sentiasa setia menyumbang tenaga dan fikiran demi misi murni ini. Mereka adalah nadi yang menjadikan pusat ini relevan dalam arus perubahan zaman selari dengan aspirasi Malaysia Madani yang mengangkat nilai keinsanan, ihsan dan kemampanan sejagat. Puteri Kadazan berkain kelingkan, senyum sekilas menyambut hidangan. Sekalung penghargaan kami titipkan, tidak terbalas jasa usaha bakti kalian. Usaha Pusat Dialog ini juga seiring dengan matlamat pembangunan mampan SDG, khususnya dalam hal mempromosi keamanan, keadilan, institusi yang kukuh dan pembangunan sosial menyeluruh tanpa diskriminasi. Kejayaan Pusat Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya ini telah menjadi pencetus kepada pelbagai penyelidikan ilmiah bersifat antara agama dan antara budaya yang telah menghasilkan puluhan penerbitan berimpak tinggi bukan sahaja di Malaysia, malah di peringkat antarabangsa. Hasil penyelidikan ini mendapat pengiktirafan meluas sehingga mendapat beberapa karya yang berkaitan dengan dialog, isu kemanusiaan diterjemahkan dalam pelbagai bahasa dunia, membuktikan bahawa mesej keamanan dan peradaban yang dibawa oleh Malaysia melalui pusat ini adalah bersifat sejagat dan merentas sempadan. Lebih penting lagi, pusat ini telah menjalin hubungan erat dan aktif bersama pelbagai institusi seperti Jabatan Kemajuan Islam Malaysia (JAKIM), Institut Kefahaman Islam Malaysia (IKIM), Majlis Agama Islam Negeri Selangor dan Melaka, dan NGO dan pertubuhan keagamaan seperti Sokagakai Malaysia, Persatuan Buddhis Malaysia, ASEAN, Persatuan Bahai, Christian Federation of Malaysia, Sikh Association dan banyak lagi dalam memelihara dan menyuarakan kedamaian sejagat melalui dialog yang inklusif dan saling menghormati. Kerjasama seperti ini bukan sekadar simbolik, tetapi telah melahirkan pelbagai inisiatif akar umbi, penerbitan bersama dan program yang menyentuh hati masyarakat, mempertaut jalinan hati dan kerjasama yang erat, menghormati perbezaan, meraihkan kebersamaan. Hadirin dan hadirat yang saya sanjungi, mesej utama ini merupakan intipati penting dalam pelestarian pembudayaan dan dialog peradaban di Persada Antarabangsa dan lebih khusus dalam konteks Malaysia sebagai kepengurusian ASEAN. Izinkan saya meneruskan ucapan ini dalam bahasa Inggeris. distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, respected faith leaders, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor and deep humility that we welcome you to this momentous occasion, the 30th anniversary conference of the Universiti Malaya Center for Civilizational Dialogue, UMCCD. This milestone is not merely a commemoration of time, but a celebration of purpose, 3 decades of unwavering commitment to fostering peace, understanding, and harmonious coexistence across civilization and religious tradition. Established as a platform for meaningful engagement, the UMCCD has long served as a guardian of dialogue, a preserver of wisdom, and the nurturer of mutual respect grounded in the noble principle of faith, the faith of coexistence. The Center has continuously championed the voice of peace in a fragmented world, sowing the seed of mahabbah, compassionate love, trust, and unity across differences. In doing so, it embodies the vision of unity in diversity, where distinctions are not seen as barriers but as blessings that enrich our collective humanity. As we reflect on this remarkable journey, we are reminded that dialogue is not an end in itself, but a living, breathing process that shapes the moral fabric of society. The UMCCD remains steadfast in its mission to cultivate individuals of noble character, insan berakhlak mulia, who are guided by empathy, driven by justice, and committed to the shared ideal of peace and human dignity. May this conference serve as a renewed call to action to build bridges over boundaries and to carry forward the torch of civilizational dialogue for generation to come. Saya ingin merakamkan jutaan terima kasih atas usaha dan pengorbanan setiap individu dan pasukan petugas yang telah bertengkus lumus menjayakan persidangan serta sambutan 30 tahun Pusat Dialog ini. Terima kasih kepada bahagian corporate Universiti Malaya, pejabat JPPHB, keselamatan, kesihatan PPUM dan banyak lagi yang membantu kami, termasuk University Club yang tidak boleh saya sebutkan satu persatu. Pisang emas di bawah belayar, masak sebiji di atas peti. Sokongan semua pihak takkan terbayar, budi dikenang sehingga akhir hayat kami. Hadirin dan hadirat yang saya hormati, menjedari bumi mana yang tidak ditimpa hujan, laut mana yang tidak bergelora, biarlah saya ungkapkan sedemikian. Kalau ada wajah yang tersalah pandang, kalau ada nama yang tersalah sebut, kalau ada gelar tersalah ucap, kalau ada yang duduk di salah tempat, kami ungkapkan dengan kapal api dari seberang, syarat dengan barang-barangan. Jika ada terlebih terkurang, diumpat tidak, dicaci pun jangan. Sebagai penutup bicara, izinkan saya merakamkan setinggi-tinggi tahniah dan juga terima kasih kepada semua tanpa dukungan padu daripada barisan kepimpinan universiti, para ucap utama dan para panelis yang pakar. Persidangan ini tidak mungkin menjadi kenyataan. Saya ingin mengucapkan sekali lagi tahniah dan syabas kepada Pusat Dialog atas commemorating as a 30th anniversary. Moga persidangan ini menjadi medan subur yang menyemai gagasan baru, bukan sekadar untuk mewarnai wacana akademik, tetapi untuk meresap ke dalam denyut nadi kehidupan sosial dan kebudayaan kita. Biarlah idea yang tercetus daripada dialog hari ini menjelma sebagai panduan hidup, memperkukuh jalinan kemanusiaan. Ayuh kita terus melangkah bersama mengangkat martabat dialog peradaban ini sebagai teras keharmonian dan tunggak perpaduan negara yang kita cintai. Dengan ini saya sudahi ucapan saya dengan kalimah wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Universiti Malaya tertumpahnya kasih. Sekian, terima kasih.
Terima kasih yang berusaha Profesor Khadijah atas ucapan alu-aluan sebentar tadi. Seterusnya, majlis diserikan lagi dengan ucapan Naib Chancellor Universiti Malaya. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan Yang Berbahagia Profesor Datuk Seri Insinyur Dr. Nur Azwan Abu Osman untuk menyampaikan ucapan. Dengan segala hormatnya dipersilakan.
Terima kasih Saudara Pengerusi Majlis. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang kita semua kasihi Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri dan juga alumni Universiti Malaya. Seterusnya, yang saya juga hormati Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Seri Diraja Dr. Zamri bin Abdul Kadir, Menteri Pendidikan Tinggi dan juga sering cakna kepada Universiti Malaya. Yang berhormat ahli-ahli jemaah menteri dan timbalan-timbalan menteri, tuan yang terutama, duta-duta dan perwakilan asing, barisan Pro-Chancellor Universiti Malaya, barisan Lembaga Pengarah Universiti yang berusaha, sahabat saya Profesor Dr. Khadijah Muhammad Hambali, dan juga tidak lupa yang bahagia Profesor Datuk Azizan Baharudin, mantan pengarah Pusat Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya, para panel dan peserta persidangan pegawai kerajaan, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang saya hormati sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bersyukur kita kepada Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala kerana dengan limpah kurnianya dapat kita semua bersama-sama dalam satu majlis yang saya kira sangat hebat, yang dihadiri oleh orang-orang yang hebat, iaitu Persidangan Antarabangsa Dialog Peradaban. 3 dekad lalu, di kampus Keramat inilah benih pertama dialog antara peradaban telah disemai. Dari ruang kuliah ke forum antarabangsa, dari wacana ilmiah ke pentas dunia, Universiti Malaya menjadi pelantar terbuka untuk naluri dan suara yang mahu membina jabatan kesefahaman. Dialog peradaban yang kita katakan ini bukan sekadar wacana akademik, akan tetapi ianya merupakan satu iltizam etika, moral dan manusiawi untuk mempertemukan nilai-nilai yang merentasi sempadan kaum, kepercayaan dan ideologi. Seperti mana yang selalu dizahirkan oleh Yang Berhormat Perdana Menteri, kekuatan sesebuah tamadun bukan hanya terletak pada pencapaian ekonomi atau ketenteraannya semata-mata, akan tetapi ianya terletak pada ketinggian ilmu, budi, adab serta kematangan dalam mendepani perbezaan. Inilah sebenarnya prinsip asas, prinsip yang menjadi roh kepada dialog antara budaya peradaban sejak mula lagi. We appreciate your wisdom, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the world today stands at a crossroad where we must embrace a global spirit of togetherness and synergy between and among civilizations. Indeed, it is my pleasure to remind ourselves that it was in March 1995 that this university hosted the first inter-civilizational dialogue between Islam and Confucianism, championed by none other than our dear Prime Minister, who was the Deputy Prime Minister at that time. As he wrote in his book, The Asia Renaissance, in the year of 1996, we must reject the notion of any one civilization dominating the global system. In this context, the mission of the conference today is to rekindle the spirit of unity in diversity. We are all aware that ASEAN's diversity is greatest strength. ASEAN must be the world's living lab for civilizational synergy and shining examples through this mechanism of dialogue of civilization. We should also invest in an ASEAN network of civilizational observatories that can monitor intellectual intentions over early warning system of conflicts and promote cultural together. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of all these challenges, climate, conflict, poverty, health, lies a single truth. No nation, no civilization, no people can face them alone. The only way forward is together. We have seen what this unity brings. During World War I and World War II, claimed more than 100 million lives. The atomic age reminded us how close we have come to destroying everything. We cannot go back. The stakes are too high. Let us instead choose a future of peace, a future where the child in Gaza, the student in Kuala Lumpur, The teacher in Nairobi and the worker in Europe, for example, all see themselves in one another. Dear members of the audience, today almost 700 million, about 8.5% of humanity, live in extreme poverty on less than $2.50 a day. Inequality has worsened, as our Prime Minister also raised this in the United Nations, quote, "The super rich are living side by side with the ultra poor," unquote. It needs a collective, global, and civilizational efforts to address inequalities, tackle injustice, and create a better tomorrow for all, for our new generations to come. We must champion a new age, an age of humanity, one founded on the pillars of compassion, wisdom, education, technology, and shared humanity. Hence, the concept of the dialogue of civilization highlights the fundamental truth that we are all human beings with the same aspiration for justice, dignity, security, and prosperity. I must say that having our Prime Ministers here at ICONCIDI 25 personally championing the dialogue of civilizations sends a powerful message to Universiti Malaya, to Malaysia, which will continue to punch above its weight for global peace and understanding in ASEAN and the world. For that, sir, we thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, another thing is that before I end these remarks, I invite all of us to imagine the world 30 years from now. Let the next 30 years be an era where spirit of togetherness and the dialogue of civilizations are not just mere slogans, but the norms embedded in our education system, our diplomacy, and our everyday interactions. Akhir kata, semoga wacana yang kita bentangkan pada hari ini memberkas dalam jiwa kita dan menjadi titik tolak kepada gelombang baharu pemikiran yang lebih adil, lebih insani dan lebih memerdekakan. Tumbuh merimbun si pohon jati, akar bersatu di tanah sejahtera, biar berbeza rupa dan hati, ilmu dan adab penyatu kita. Sekian, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri atas ucapan itu tadi. Marilah kita sama-sama saksikan montaj khas Sempena Persidangan Antarabangsa Dialog Peradaban ICONCIDI 25.
Dialog Peradaban Islam dan Faham Konfusia ini merupakan satu permulaan baru, tanda tahap muafakat yang meningkat di kalangan rakyat Malaysia, tanda keyakinan baru yang termeterai di kalangan masyarakat pelbagai kaum dan pelbagai agama di negara kita, tanda bahawa kita telah bersedia untuk memberikan makna baru kepada perpaduan rakyat, dalam arti kata kesediaan untuk mendalami pemikiran dan falsafah hidup bersama, tanda bahawa kita bersedia untuk meningkat dan melangkah bagi memperkasa budaya kita di Malaysia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this seminar marks the beginning of a major development in the Asian consciousness.
Kini kita telah sampai ke kemuncak majlis. Dengan segala hormatnya, majlis mempersilakan Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri, untuk menyampaikan ucap tama Persidangan Antarabangsa Dialog Peradaban ICONCIDI 25. Dengan segala hormatnya dipersilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil karim wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Saya baru lagi dari Makam Pahlawan untuk mengiringi jenazah mantan Perdana Menteri dan juga alumni Universiti Malaya, sahabat dan keluarga Tun Abdullah Badawi. Jadi wajar saya ambil kesempatan ini untuk mengajak saudara baca Fatihah atau tafakur, mengenang dan mendoakan agar roh dicucuri rahmat. Al-Fatihah. Rakan-rakan yang saya muliakan, Saudara Menteri Pendidikan Tinggi Zamri ataupun Aisyah Ong, Nur Azwan, Chancellor, Profesor Khadijah yang menyelenggara, dan Anwar, dan ahli lembaga, dan rakan-rakan yang saya muliakan. Ramai menteri-menteri ada ni, Chan Likang ada, Menteri Perpaduan pun ada, macam-macam menteri ada. Dan yang penting juga, ramai ahli parlimen. Itu perkembangan baik di Malaysia ni. Daripada bergelut soal-soal lain, soal-soal remeh-temeh. Jadi ini ada isu yang agak lebih substantif, membicara soal bangsa, negara dan masa depan peradaban. Dan wajar saya juga nyatakan penghargaan khususnya pada Profesor Osman Bakar dan Profesor Izam Harudin yang sebenarnya menghadai badan dan Dialog Peradaban Universiti Malaya menyusuli dialog Islam dan Konfusianisme. Jadi kalau saya diizinkan singkap sebentar tentang pengalaman 30 tahun yang lalu, ini agak penting untuk kita fahami. Kita hidup di Malaysia ini dalam negara yang pelbagai kaum, pelbagai agama, walaupun Islam agama persekutuan dan majoriti rakyatnya orang Melayu. Tapi kita sedar walaupun kita berkawan, bersahabat, berjiran, belajar satu kuliah puluhan tahun, tapi tidak ada upaya cara bersungguh untuk memahami dan menghormati dalam semangat Al-Quran di ta'arafu. Berapa orang Islam yang tahu tentang Confucianism, tentang faham agama Buddha atau Hindu? Sekadar tahu kerana mereka hidup dengan kita. Makan, minum dan sama-sama kita dalam hidup, dalam perjuangan. Berapa ramai orang-orang bukan Islam yang tahu Islam agama persekutuan, yang tahu kita puasa, yang tahu ada masjid, tapi hampir tidak tahu tentang Islam, sejarahnya dan peradabannya. Jadi yang kita mampu ialah kerana sekadar mendapat asakan dari media dan apalagi media yang dikuasai Barat, yang punya sejarah yang tersendiri. Saudara-saudara sedia tahu tentang pandangan yang dilontarkan oleh Edward Said dalam Orientalism atau Culture Imperialism yang dianggap tour de force ataupun penyanggahan yang paling keras terhadap pemikiran dominan yang menganggap Barat dan budaya Barat itu superior, tak ada masalah, tapi menghina yang lain. Sama ada Islam atau Arab atau India atau Cina atau yang lain. The other. The other itu dengan konotasi meremeh dan merendahkan. So I suggest that we reflect the past experience as to why we strongly advocated the idea of dialogue, Islam and Confucianism. Yes, most dialogues are Islam and the West, Islam and Christianity, which remains quite relevant. But it is particularly of a particular importance here in Malaysia and in ASEAN and the region that we choose to understand the majority of Asians who are, in a way or other, influenced by Confucianist ideals. So we promoted, we were very fortunate that we were able to assemble scholars and intellectual luminaries internationally with the support of the private sector and some of our media, both the Malay and the Chinese media in this country. We had, for example, scholars from Muslim scholars, Islamic scholars from the Muslim world, from the West. We had this outstanding new Confucianist scholar at that time, Harvard, now in Beijing, Tu Wei Ming, who admitted to me, and with full humility, unlike many scholars, hopefully not here, he says, Anwar, I've been talking about civilization, Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism, Northern Sung dynasty, but I had never had that opportunity to reflect and understand what Muslims and Islam think and consider important as a basic tenet and belief system. And it was here, with this encounter, that he realized, being an expert in Neo-Confucianist ethics and philosophy, that he needs to grapple with this issue, because otherwise he's only fed with Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the battle and the civil wars and the strong prejudice against the Muslims and Islam, as now reflected in what is considered or popularly known as Islamophobia. That was the background. So I was discussing with Osman. Osman, you know, a scholar, he doesn't worry about money or stuff. He just says, you know, I think are you serious? I said, of course. Then set up this center. Yeah, and I said, well, we need to. Yeah, then you are also finance minister. So he thinks he can give instructions to me. And unfortunately, he did. And we set it up. And thank you to him and Azizan following that and many others. But let us reflect in all seriousness and honesty. Have we succeeded? Yes, we did what we could. Have we succeeded? I would say, in all honesty, we have not. The rancor or rancorous exchanges in terms of rising fascism, racism, religious bigotry has been increasing. Notwithstanding so much talk about da'wah bil hikmah, which means you want to promote da'wah with wisdom. Wal maw'izatil hasanah wajadilhum millati ahsan. Repeated 3 times. You want to promote Islam? Yes. What is the criteria? 1, hikmah. And 2, ihsan. That means must be wise, and but it's not reflected in what we do, or what we hear, what we see. Sometimes it is full of hatred and misunderstanding, prejudices, and playing to this gallery. And from time to time we'll have problems with some mosque or some Hindu temple, and here you are. Never mind about facts, never mind about truth, never mind about correctness. It's just how you can incite the hatred and distrust for one another. And it's not easy. The level of sophistication, exposure in terms of knowledge in the West, particularly Europe, United States, of course, is accepted. Nobody questioned that the level of understanding and technological advancement and quality education is far superior in the West. But at the same time, you have also growing fascism. It is clearly a contradiction in terms. How is it possible that those who have acquired knowledge, promoted as doctors of letters, and promoted as professors, and not able to profess anything wise or promoting good values, but preaching hatred? So there's some basic flaw, deficiency or deficit in what we understand as education or quality education or the purpose of life. That's why I tried in this Madani. I don't know what Zamri may think this is a bit too philosophical, or I don't know, but he didn't say it to me. Well, I'm joking, don't worry. But why I've been pushing this idea to say, yes, should Malaysia focus on economic development? Yes. Should economic development and growth become fundamental to ensure our success as a nation? Affirmative. But what's the meaning of success and development and progress when people become semi-literate and dogmatic, inhuman, and condone oppression, abuse of power, or endemic corruption, as you have seen? I was here, no, I'm not talking 50 years ago, I'm talking recently. When we're talking about some of the financial scandals and fiasco, including the YMDB. Don't blame just one person. System was at fault. Where are the voices of reason? Where are the voices who talk about values in the universities? Why the silence among those elites? So we have to actually answer this very fundamental, pertinent question. What went wrong? Of course, because our education, what we promote, does not also promote understanding, tolerance, and good values. Well, they say we're all educated, we have that, but no. But is this a dream? No. It has been practiced in the past. There's so much tolerance in the past. Yes, you can cite, for example, Nur Azwan was talking about, various wars. Khadijah was talking also. Yes, there were. Undoubtedly, it's historical fact. Not only among Islam and Christians, or Islam and Hindus, but among the Christians, the Catholics and the Protestants, they cost millions of lives. I was telling my friends, some Muslim groups recently, he was shocked and dismayed. They said, what? I was telling him about the Crusades. The Crusades only known to be Muslim-Christian warfare. I said, not entirely true. If you study the history of the Crusade, the first group they slaughtered was the Orthodox Church in Constantinople. You see? Because they think that the Greek Orthodox Church does not represent the true brand of Christianity. Similarly, in Islam, some of the more fanatical segments, factions, sects can be easily prone to this mentality of Khawarij, which means an extreme interpretation. We represent the righteous and the right, and we cannot therefore condone, for whatever reason, those who differ, because they will create mischief and fasad fill out, which means or corruption and destruction on earth. So you have that. But we have also great stories, a great tale, which must be promoted in this dialogue, which includes, of course, the period of convivencia in the Andalusian experience. You see, the 400 years prior to the defeat and the decadence of Andalusia was this attempt by Christians, Muslims, and Jews working, learning, having this huge exchanges, not rancorous, not of hatred, but to prove that we are in a way presenting the better view, better vision. And there was this healthy philosophical, intellectual debate, forging understanding and respect. They respect knowledge, although you do not necessarily represent the Islamic viewpoint, or the Christians, not the Christian viewpoint, or the Jews. This, I remember the address the Georgetown University in 1993, I think, where I then tried and popularized this convivencia concept, that how those who have this measure of understanding and tolerance should then promote. We are not promoting same faith or same set of rituals. I pray differently. However understanding and tolerant I am, I pray differently, I fast differently. That's my belief system. But this does not warrant hatred and enmity. Because the Buddhists may fast differently, of course, and pray differently, and meditate differently. And the mantra can be longer than us. I do appreciate that. Yeah. I tried sitting down with some of my Buddhist friends near Bangkok. You see, we go to Bangkok to do the mantra. I don't know, Nona Zuan went to Bangkok for what? No, okay, back to this focus issue about dialogue or civilization. For us, to me, why we promote values like Madani? Because it's our survival. First, we are promoting what we believe as the truth, at the right period. We are human beings. I don't choose to be a Malay. I'm born a Malay. You don't choose to be a Chinese. Or you don't choose this color. Some people are not too happy with the color. They have this whitening process. Okay? We don't choose to be that. So this is the beauty to us as Muslims, the creation of Allah. That's why the term is ta'arafu, and recognition of the different tribes. Even during the Prophet, the period of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know about, okay, the Meccan community, the Quraysh, and of course, Yathrib, the Medina, different sects, but okay, they are different, they are all Arabs. But you have Salman Farsi, elevated to a very high pedestal. The Sahaba companion that suggested the first translation of the Quran into a foreign language, in Persian. You have Bilal al-Habasha, the black Bilal, thick lips, dark complexion, but elevated as a companion and family of the Prophet. There's one incident, for example, but this is not promoted. Why is promoted? Sometimes you say, not that I'm intolerant listening to some of this tazkirah. They just, how the Christians are trying to take over and Christianize Penang. My goodness, I'm from Penang. And that the azan is not heard in Penang. I think you went probably at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no azan. Okay, or probably hard of hearing. And then the influence of Chinese political party is a threat to the country. I mean, you go on. Why don't you come out with a solution? Why don't you come up with it? Well, there are also some strength and goodness in them. Of course, there's some rotten Chinese, not here, I mean, Chan Chung, Lin Kang, they are good people. But there are some nasty guys. But so are there some nasty Malays or nasty Indians and Hindus. So what? Choose the good ones, promote the good ones. They represent our conscience, our values. That's important. But you don't go and preach hatred and feeling of insecurity. We will destroy the fabric of this country, and nobody would gain. You see, in any multiracial pluralistic society or country, it's a major battle. How to ensure there is peace and political stability. Without that, there's no dialogue. What dialogue are you talking about when there's ensuing battle and fighting? So we are a unique position. We are, alhamdulillah, in a unique position in Malaysia, notwithstanding some of the problems and skirmishes that we have to endure from time to time. We are in a unique position to showcase that we can survive and manage as a community. But what I'm saying is reflecting what is the present predicament that we have to accept. What? For the last 30 years, Osman, you've been preaching about dialogue. I want you to talk to some of our members of parliament to understand that. You have absolutely zero understanding about appreciating and understanding and respecting one another. Some of the speeches represent just the most extreme voice against reason. And that you want the National Unity Minister struggling to try and promote the understanding. Good luck to him. But we cannot fail. So that is why I come here. One, the colleagues in Malaya, to show, to not only impress upon you, but to show that we are committed to this. And we cannot fail. All right? This must be this voice of reason. I always say they challenge. They says, Anwar, under you, you're too multiracial, you're too kind to the rest, we will fail. I say we fail not because we are friendly with the non-Malays. We fail because we condone corrupt leaders, responsible and semi-literate leaders representing our cause. We fail because of that. We must succeed if we talk about reason, about respect, about good governance and good values that transcend race. And that, to me, is what dialogue is all about. And of course, I forget, I'm not in a lecture hall. They could see my passion, my excitement. Zamri always say to me that I am in the wrong profession. Because you see me enjoying this, giving these sort of lectures. I forgot, but I have a text actually here. Yeah. Very academic. Okay. So in conclusion, let me say this, that firstly, these dialogues are critical for our survival, to understand, appreciate one another, to realize that we are, after all, human beings. That's the karamah insaniya. The beauty and is to promote that sort of understanding and recognize human dignity. If you say human dignity, it transcends class, race, or religious belief. It's what is just, what is right. And it can only be done through some ihsan and rahmah, compassion, and strong believer in the principle of justice. Is it easy? No. I can tell you, now that I'm here in the stewardship of this country, I am telling you it's not easy. Not many would appreciate this. If I talk to the masses or the so-called elites in KL or Ipoh or Penang or Sabah or Sarawak, not many will appreciate that here comes the Prime Minister who wants to promote strongly dialogue between races, between religions, between civilizations. So it's not just a political gimmick. I don't think I can garner more votes just because I think I need to promote this dialogue. But believe me, and I am appreciative of the fact that so many of our younger MPs are here, that we must be convinced, firstly, this is the right thing to do. Because that's what all our religions tell us. Justice and human dignity. And secondly, which is of paramount importance for a multi-ethnic country like Malaysia, this is a guarantee for our own survival. You fall prey to these desperate, semi-literate politicians harping on issues of race and religion. Yes, it's easier. Learn from the experience in Europe. It's easier to be a fascist, to talk about your survival as a race, than to talk about wisdom and compassion and human dignity. So I'm not discouraging you, I'm just telling you this is our challenge. A challenge to teachers and professors, a challenge to universities, where to promote what is right, what can guarantee our peace and security, or to fall prey to the voices of unreason and which cause calamity to this country. Jadi sekali lagi saya ucap terima kasih kepada saudara kerana sabar sekali dengar. Dan percayalah saya bercakap dengan perasaan dari hati sanubari untuk menggalakkan persefahaman yang lebih baik di kalangan kita dalam rantau ASEAN dan Asia sebagai contoh untuk kita sampaikan kepada dunia bahawa dalam keadaan pertembungan yang sengit, yang tidak menentu, perbenturan fahaman dan idea, masih ada upaya di kalangan yang mahu pertahankan prinsip hidup, kemurnian yang berdasarkan nilai sejagat. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Dimohon Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri untuk kekal berdiri di atas pentas. Dijemput Dikti Kehormat untuk naik ke pentas bagi mengiringi Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri untuk sesi menandatangani Plak Sempena Persidangan Antarabangsa Dialog Peradaban ICONCIDI 25. Terima kasih kepada Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri. Dipersilakan kembali ke tempat duduk untuk bergambar kenangan bersama hadirin sekalian.
Sepenuh hati, jiwa, semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia Madani. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, bangunkan Malaysia Madani. Sepenuh hati, jiwa.
Mohon hadirin sekalian sekalian, bergerak ke bahagian tengah bagi sesi bergambar bersama Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri dan juga Div-Div Kehormat. Terima kasih. Alhamdulillah, selesai sudah Persidangan Antarabangsa Dialog Peradaban ICONCIDI 25 petang ini. Majlis mengumumkan Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri meninggalkan majlis. Bagi pihak Universiti Malaya, kami merakamkan setinggi-tinggi penghargaan dan terima kasih kepada semua yang telah menjayakan majlis ini dengan penuh semangat dan dedikasi.
Malaysia Madani.